After a long, exhausting day at the clinic, I came home tired and just wanted a little peace, maybe even a hug from my husband. But the second I opened the door, my whole world shattered. My breath stopped, my hands shook, and I dropped to the floor at what I saw inside. Imagine coming home from the battlefield, the weight of distant wars still clinging to your soul, only to find the most brutal fight of your life waiting for you in your own driveway. The words hit him like a physical blow, colder than any desert wind, more devastating than any explosion. Don't bother coming. The locks are changed. The kids don't want you. It's over. That's how Brody learned his marriage was dead, and that's when he decided the real war had just begun. Brody Harlow stepped off that military transport at Fort Benning, the oppressive July heat a physical weight after 3 grueling tours with the Army Rangers. Home. Finally home. His duffel bag felt light compared to the invisible load of everything he'd seen. He checked his phone, expecting a message from Melanie, his wife of 12 years, confirming she was on her way. What he read instead made his stomach drop out of him. That ice-cold text. He stood motionless in the sweltering Georgia sun, fellow soldiers streaming past, joyfully reuniting with their families. The message burned into his retinas. Their last video call, just 3 weeks ago, had seemed tense, sure, but normal enough. Nothing to suggest this. A dozen angry responses flashed through his mind, but Brody, the ranger known for unnerving calm in chaos, typed just 2 words, "as you wish." Anyone who truly knew him would recognize the quiet danger in those words. It was what he said before executing the most devastating operations with surgical precision. His first call wasn't to his wife. It was to Leona Fisk. Leona Fisk speaking. The voice was crisp, professional. "It's Brody Harlow. I need your services immediately." A pause. "I thought you weren't back until next week." Brody's voice was flat. "Plans changed. Can you meet today?" "Absolutely. My office. 2 hours." Brody hailed a cab, directing it not to the suburban home where his wife and children, Trevor, 16, and Amelia, 14, supposedly no longer wanted him, but to the downtown Atlanta office of one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the state. As the cab pulled away, he allowed himself one moment, just one, of raw, gut-wrenching betrayal, squeezing his eyes shut against the pain. Then, just like countless times in combat, he compartmentalized. This was now a mission. And Brody Harlow never failed a mission. Leona Fisk's office screamed success and intimidation. Gleaming surfaces, sharp edges, just like the woman herself. Immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, eyes that seemed to calculate your worth the moment you walked in. She leaned back in her chair after Brody explained the situation. "So," she said, her voice dry. "She waited until you were literally on U.S. soil to tell you not to come home. That's cold, even by my standards." Brody cut to the chase. "I need to know what I'm dealing with. And then I need options." Leona's smile was all predator. "What exactly did you mean when you texted, 'as you wish'?" Brody's gaze was steady. "It meant I'm going to respect her wishes to end our marriage. But on my terms." "Good," Leona replied. "The weak ones want to salvage what can't be fixed. You're not here to win her back." "No," Brody confirmed. "I'm here to win." For the next hour, they meticulously constructed the first phase of what Leona called the nuclear option. By the time he left her office, Brody had signed paperwork setting in motion a series of financial and legal maneuvers, all to be executed at precisely 9 a.m. the following morning. He secured a hotel room, then made his second strategic call. Wyatt Dennison, his oldest friend, the kind of brother forged in rural Pennsylvania and then in uniform. "I need surveillance on my house," Brody explained, after giving Wyatt the horrifying rundown. "Need to know who's coming and going." "You think there's someone else?" Wyatt stated, not asked. "I need confirmation and details." "I'm on it." "And Brody, I'm sorry, brother." By nightfall, Brody's phone began vibrating incessantly. "Melanie." He let it go to voicemail. Then came the texts. "What did you do? Answer your damn phone. You can't just disappear like this." But Brody wasn't playing that game. At exactly 10:03 p.m., Wyatt sent a series of photos. A midnight blue Audi in his driveway. A tall man with expensively cut hair exiting the vehicle, enthusiastically greeted by Melanie at the door. The final photo, them embracing, not like new lovers, but with the comfortable, intimate familiarity of an established relationship. His name is Preston Hayes, Wyatt's message read. Real estate developer. Been at your house 6 times in the past 2 weeks. Kids seemed familiar with him. Brody set his phone down carefully. The pieces were falling into place. He slept soundly that night. The deep, clear sleep of a man with purpose. At 9:01 a.m. the next morning, his phone erupted again. This time, it wasn't Melanie. It was her lawyer, a man named Rutherford, whose voice climbed several octaves as he ranted. You have no legal right to do that with her trust fund. 19 missed calls and you pull this. This is extortion. You can't possibly. Brody ended the call. He turned to the window, allowing himself a small, cold smile. Phase 1 complete. Brody's journey from Pennsylvania farm boy to elite Army Ranger wasn't about brute strength. It was paved with exceptional discipline and a natural tactical brilliance. He learned early that survival required strategy, patience, precision. He met Melanie Stanford during his first leave after Ranger school. She was attending law school at Georgetown, brilliant, ambitious, from a wealthy New England family. Their attraction was immediate, consuming. 6 months later, they were married, her family grudgingly accepting the union, despite their reservations about a military man. The early years, when Trevor was born and Brody was stateside, were good. Melanie built her law career. Brody moved up the Ranger ranks. But after Amelia's birth, the deployments grew longer, more dangerous. Each time Brody returned, the distance between them had grown. During his second tour, Melanie's father died, leaving her a substantial trust fund with Byzantine conditions. One, that her spouse couldn't access it without her express permission. Another, that if she divorced, the funds would be held in trust until she remarried or turned 55. What Melanie didn't know was that Brody, with his tactical mind, had spent years studying financial law as a hobby, an obsession with understanding systems. He'd found a loophole in her trust that even her father's expensive lawyers had missed. It involved temporary reassignment of management rights during periods of docile abandonment by either spouse. By sending that text message while he was still returning from deployment, she had inadvertently triggered the clause. Brody hadn't touched a penny of her money, but he'd legally frozen the entire trust, preventing any withdrawals or transfers. Now, back in Leona's office for their follow-up, she slid a folder across her desk. You were right, she said. Preston Hayes isn't just your wife's lover. They've known each other since before your marriage. He was her ex-boyfriend from law school. Brody nodded, unsurprised. The timing, Leona continued, based on credit card records, hotel charges, restaurant receipts. They reconnected approximately 18 months ago, shortly after you left for your last tour. 18 months. While he was clearing buildings and watching friends die, Melanie was rebuilding her life with someone else, someone who'd been waiting in the wings. And my children? Brody asked, his voice betraying emotion for the first time. Leona's expression softened marginally. Preston has been playing daddy. Weekend trips, expensive gifts. Your son seems resistant. His social media suggests he's angry at both adults. Your daughter appears more accepting. Brody absorbed this, his jaw tightening. What about the house? Any new mortgages or loans? No, Leona replied. But there's something interesting about the property next door to yours. It was purchased by one of Preston Hayes' shell companies 6 months ago. The pieces clicked together in Brody's mind. Not just an affair, a complete replacement. Hayes was literally moving in next door, preparing to absorb not just Brody's family, but his physical space as well. They're efficient, Brody remarked coldly. Most affairs are impulsive. This one was planned. Leona agreed. The good news is they've made mistakes, big ones. Hayes transferred $200,000 to Melanie 3 months ago, which she used to redecorate your house. That's marital property she altered using funds from her paramour. Also, she's been paying household expenses from your joint account while maintaining this relationship. Brody nodded. That's good, but not enough. I need you to find me something that will give me leverage regarding the children. Leona raised an eyebrow. The courts typically favor mothers. The courts favor stability and safety, Brody corrected. Find me something that proves she can provide neither. As he left Leona's office, Brody's phone buzzed with a text from Wyatt. Got something big. Meet me at the usual place. The usual place was a small diner on the outskirts of Atlanta, a familiar spot from their leaves. Brody spotted Wyatt in a back booth, posture still military straight despite his civilian clothes. How bad? Brody asked, sliding in. Depends on your definition, Wyatt replied, pushing a small flash drive across the table. Your wife and her boyfriend have been plotting more than just playing house. They're planning to relocate to Costa Rica. Property purchases, school inquiries for the kids, everything. Brody felt a cold shock. When? Next month. Right after school starts. The kids don't know yet. Brody pocketed the flash drive. His family wasn't just moving on without him. They were planning to disappear to another country. The coldness inside him crystallized into something harder, more resolute. I need one more thing, Brody said. Access to our home. Not to confront them. Just to retrieve something that belongs to me. When? Tonight. They're attending a charity gala downtown. The kids will be at Hayes's lake house with his housekeeper. Wyatt studied his friend's face. Brody, whatever you're planning, is necessary. Brody finished for him. Are you with me or not? Their eyes locked in silent communication, the kind forged in combat. Always, Wyatt finally said. But remember who you are. Brody's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's exactly what I'm counting on them forgetting. The house looked exactly as Brody remembered it from the outside, a spacious colonial in an exclusive suburb. Inside, however, everything had changed. Gone were the comfortable leather couches he'd selected, replaced by sleek modern furniture, cool grays and blues. Family photos had been removed, the walls now adorned with abstract art. It was as if Melanie had attempted to erase any evidence of their life together. Brody moved silently through the transformed space, cataloging the changes with detached precision. In the home office, he found what he was looking for, a hidden wall safe behind a painting. The combination was Trevor's birthday, just as he'd left it. Inside was a small fireproof box containing his grandfather's World War II medals, documents from his military career, and a sealed envelope. He took only the envelope, leaving the rest untouched. As he turned to leave, he noticed something on Melanie's desk. Architectural plans. He photographed them carefully. Detailed renderings for connecting their property with the house next door, creating one massive estate. The plans were dated 14 months ago, 4 months into his last deployment. Before leaving, Brody made one last stop at his children's rooms. Trevor's remained much as he remembered, sports trophies, gaming posters, organized chaos. On his desk was a framed photo that made Brody pause, himself and Trevor on a fishing trip 3 years ago, both smiling widely. It was the only photo of Brody remaining visible in the entire house. Amelia's room had transformed completely, now decorated in sophisticated purples and silvers that made it look more like a college student's apartment than a 14-year-old's bedroom. On her bulletin board, Brody spotted concert tickets, school awards, and a photo of Amelia, Melanie, and Preston at what appeared to be a ski resort. They looked like a perfect family unit. He left as silently as he'd entered, the house keys he'd used, keys that supposedly no longer worked, placed deliberately on the kitchen counter where Melanie would find them. The next morning, Brody met with Harris Bentley, a former intelligence officer turned private investigator whom Wyatt had recommended. I need everything on Preston Hayes, Brody explained. Not just the surface level. I need to know what he's hiding. Harris, a slight man with penetrating eyes, nodded. Everyone's hiding something. How deep do you want me to go? All the way. While Harris conducted his investigation, Brody executed the next phase of his plan. He contacted Trevor's lacrosse coach, arranging to accidentally run into his son after practice. When Trevor emerged from the field house, he stopped cold at the sight of his father. Dad, the teenager's voice cracked. Mom said you weren't coming back. I'm here, son, Brody said simply. Trevor's face cycled through shock, confusion, and anger. Where have you been? It's been 4 days since you landed. I needed to get some things in order first. Your mother made it clear I wasn't welcome at home. Trevor looked away. She said you abandoned us. That you chose the Rangers over us. Is that why you didn't want to see me? Brody asked. I never said that. Trevor's head snapped up. She told us you wanted a clean break. No messy goodbyes. Brody kept his expression neutral despite the surge of anger. I see. Are you and Mom getting divorced? It seems that way. Trevor kicked at the ground. Because of Preston, partly. I hate him, Trevor muttered. He acts like he's doing us all this big favor. Amelia buys it, but I don't. They talked for 30 minutes, Brody careful not to disparage Melanie, but still establishing that many of Trevor's assumptions were based on lies. When Melanie's SUV pulled into the parking lot, Brody stood. I have to go. But Trevor, whatever happens between your mother and me, I'm still your father. That doesn't change. As Brody walked away, Trevor called. After him. Dad, are you just going to let him take everything? Brody turned. His expression unreadable. No, son. I'm not. Later that evening, Harris Bentley delivered his preliminary findings. Preston Hayes is legitimate on paper, Harris began. Successful developments, clean record, respected in the community. But there are inconsistencies. 3 former business partners who suddenly sold their shares for pennies on the dollar. A building inspector who changed career paths after approving one of Hayes's controversial properties. And most interestingly, a pattern of targeting wealthy, married women as investors while their husbands are otherwise occupied. Brody leaned forward. Explain. He courts women whose husbands are frequently absent. Military, international business, politics. Becomes their friend, confidant, then business advisor. Eventually, the husband is gone permanently, divorce usually, and Hayes remains with access to the family's wealth through the woman. And the move to Costa Rica? Harris's expression darkened. That's where it gets concerning. Hayes has property there, yes. But he also has connections to less savory enterprises. The area where he's purchased land is known for being a haven for those looking to disappear from financial or legal obligations. He's planning to isolate her, Brody concluded. Get her away from family, friends, familiar legal systems. Possibly. The timeline is aggressive. Property transfer for your house is already in motion, scheduled to close in 3 weeks. Brody nodded. That's why she needed the divorce finalized quickly. They're liquidating assets before disappearing. There's one more thing, Harris added. The envelope you retrieved from your safe. What was in it? Insurance, Brody replied. Something I suspected might be necessary someday. The envelope contained documentation of an agreement Brody had made with Melanie's father before his death. A promise that in exchange for Brody signing a prenuptial agreement limiting his claims to Melanie's family money, the older man would establish a separate trust for Brody's military earnings to protect them in case of divorce. The agreement had been properly notarized, but never filed with the main trust documents. This piece of leverage, combined with Harris's findings, gave Brody what he needed for the next phase. He called Leona. I'm ready to make my move, he said. Set up a meeting with Melanie and her lawyer for tomorrow. They're demanding you unfreeze the trust immediately, Leona warned. Tell them I'm prepared to discuss terms. Conference room, your office, 2 p.m. And if they refuse? They won't, Brody said confidently. Melanie's got a timeline to keep. The conference room crackled with tension. Melanie sat across from Brody, her once familiar face now a mask of cold disdain. Beside her, Rutherford, a silver-haired attorney, projected cultivated outrage. Leona, by contrast, appeared relaxed, almost amused. This is harassment and financial abuse, Rutherford began. Your client has maliciously interfered with assets that are explicitly excluded from marital property. Leona smiled. My client has exercised a legitimate legal option triggered by Mrs. Harlow's own actions. Perhaps if she'd waited until he was actually home before changing the locks and barring him from his residence, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Melanie's eyes narrowed. You weren't supposed to be back for another week. It was the first time she directly addressed Brody, her voice tight, controlled. Deployment schedules change, Brody replied evenly. But your plans were well underway regardless, weren't they? What plans? Rutherford interjected. Brody slid a folder across the table. Property purchases in Costa Rica. School applications for my children. Airline tickets. Color drained from Melanie's face as she flipped through the documents. How did you? You're planning to take my children out of the country without my knowledge or consent, Brody continued. That's parental kidnapping. It's a vacation property. Melanie snapped. And you've been absent for most of their lives anyway. Absent serving my country, Brody corrected. Not absent by choice. You had choices. Melanie's composure cracked. Every reenlistment was a choice. Every special assignment was a choice. You chose the Rangers over us every single time. And you chose Preston Hayes long before my last deployment, Brody countered. 14 months ago, to be precise, when you commissioned architectural plans to connect our property with his. Rutherford cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Perhaps we should focus on the immediate issue of the trust fund. I'll unfreeze the trust, Brody said, on 2 conditions. Melanie's relief was palpable, but short-lived. First, the children stay in Atlanta through the end of the school year, with a standard joint custody arrangement. No international relocations without court approval. Rutherford nodded. That's reasonable. Second, I want the truth from you, Melanie. Not about the affair. About what you told the kids. Melanie's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. You told them I abandoned them. That I didn't want to see them. I protected them from being hurt. Melanie retorted. What was I supposed to say? Your father might come home in a body bag. You lied to them, Brody said quietly. Trevor never said he didn't want to see me. Neither did Amelia. That was your manipulation. The room fell silent. Even Rutherford looked troubled. I want you to correct the record, Brody continued. Tell them the truth. Then we can discuss unfreezing the trust. And if I refuse? Melanie challenged. Brody slid another document across the table, the agreement with her father. Then this gets filed with the trust administrators. Your father made certain promises to me that supersede your prenuptial protections. Melanie's face went white as she read the document. Dad would never. Your father respected service and sacrifice, Brody said. He also recognized that you inherited his ruthless streak. This was his insurance policy against exactly this scenario. After 30 long seconds, Melanie nodded once, sharply. Fine. I'll tell them the truth. But this doesn't change anything, Brody. I'm still divorcing you. I wouldn't have it any other way, Brody replied coolly. That evening, Brody received a text from Trevor. Mom told us what really happened. Why didn't you call us yourself? Brody replied, I needed to be certain I could be part of your lives before making promises. Are you back for good now? Came the response. Yes. No more deployments. A long pause. Then, Amelia's mad at Mom. She's crying in her room. Brody's chest tightened. Tell her I'll see you both this weekend. My place. You have a place? I will by Saturday. The next phase was accelerating faster than anticipated. Brody needed to secure a residence and establish stability quickly. But first, he needed to neutralize Preston Hayes. Harris Bentley's deeper investigation had uncovered more concerning patterns. Hayes' business model involved a sophisticated form of real estate fraud, buying properties through shell companies, inflating their values through cosmetic improvements and manipulated appraisals, then selling them to investment groups that included his romantic partners or their family trusts. It's not technically illegal if everyone knows what they're investing in, Harris explained. But Hayes obscures critical details. 3 of his previous romantic partners lost millions before realizing what happened. And Melanie? She's already invested $1.2 million from her trust in his latest development, the one in Costa Rica. The property exists, but the permits, infrastructure, and projected values are all smoke and mirrors. Brody processed this. So his plan is to get her and her money to Costa Rica, where U.S. financial regulations don't apply. Exactly. And once there, with no support system, she'd be completely dependent on him. Brody finished. For the first time, a flicker of concern for Melanie pierced through his anger. Despite everything, she was still the mother of his children. She'd betrayed him thoroughly, but perhaps she was being manipulated by someone equally skilled at deception. I need evidence that will stand up in court, Brody decided. And I need to move quickly. What are you planning? Harris asked. Brody's eyes glinted. To give Preston Hayes exactly what he wants. Or at least what he thinks he wants. Preston Hayes had built his life on calculated risks and the uncanny ability to read people. He prided himself on identifying vulnerabilities and exploiting them with finesse. So when Brick Harlow, the inconvenient husband who was supposed to be dispatched through a quick, clean divorce, requested a private meeting at Hayes' downtown office, curiosity overcame caution. Mr. Harlow, Hayes greeted him with professional cordiality, rising from behind his imposing desk. This is unexpected. Brody took in the man who'd been sleeping with his wife. Tall, athletic, but soft around the edges, with the practiced charm of someone used to getting his way. I thought it was time we spoke directly. Man to man. I appreciate that. Hayes gestured to a chair. Though I'm not sure what there is to discuss. Melanie has made her decision. That's precisely why I'm here, Brody said, remaining standing. To acknowledge that decision and propose a solution that benefits everyone. Hayes' expression revealed nothing, but his posture shifted subtly. I'm listening. You want Melanie. You want my house. You want my family, Brody stated flatly. I've accepted that. But the current approach, the lawyers, the court battles, will drag on for months, possibly years. Nobody wins. What exactly are you suggesting? A clean break. I sign over my interest in the house. I agree to the divorce terms. I even support your relationship, Brody forced the words out. In exchange, I want guaranteed access to my children and a financial settlement that reflects my contributions to the marriage. Hayes studied him, searching for the trap. That's surprisingly reasonable. Melanie described you as uncompromising. Military service teaches you to recognize unwinnable battles, Brody replied. And to strategically reposition. I see. Hayes leaned back. And what would this financial settlement entail? $2 million. A fraction of what prolonged litigation would cost you. You seem very confident about what litigation would cost me, Hayes noted. Brody shrugged. I've done my research. On everything. Something in his tone made Hayes pause, a brief flicker of uncertainty across his face before his confident mask returned. I'll need to discuss this with Melanie. Of course. But this offer is time-sensitive. 24 hours. That's not much time for such significant decisions. I thought you were a man who knew the value of moving quickly on opportunities, Brody replied. After Brody left, Hayes immediately called Melanie, relaying the conversation. Unknown to either of them, Harris Bentley had installed surveillance equipment in Hayes' office the previous night, with the help of a building maintenance worker who owed Wyatt a favor. He's desperate, Hayes told Melanie. This is perfect. We can wrap everything up cleanly and be in Costa Rica before winter. It seems too easy, Melanie's voice replied through the speaker. Brody doesn't give up. He's a soldier, not a businessman. He's out of his depth. You don't know him like I do. He's playing some angle. Even if he is, what can he possibly do? The trust is unfrozen. The house sale is proceeding. We have everything in motion. What about the children? Melanie asked. We'll honor the custody arrangement until we're ready to leave. By then, he'll be established in his new life, and the kids will prefer our situation anyway, especially with the private school options in Costa Rica. And if he contests the international move, by then it will be too late. Trust me, Mel. This is what we've been working toward. Everything is falling into place. The recording captured everything. The casual conspiracy to violate custody agreements, the calculated manipulation, the clear intent to defraud through the Costa Rican investment scheme. It was exactly what Brody needed. The next day, Brody received a call from Hayes accepting his terms, with a meeting scheduled to sign paperwork the following morning. That evening, he met with Leona to finalize their countermove. This is thin ice, legally speaking, Leona warned, reviewing the plan. A judge might view the recording as entrapment. The recording is just insurance, Brody assured her. The financial evidence is what matters. The documented pattern of fraud, the misrepresented investments. We just needed Hayes to confirm his intentions regarding my children. And you're sure you want to warn Melanie after everything she's done? Brody's expression hardened. This isn't about Melanie anymore. It's about protecting my children from both of them. The pieces were set. Phase 3 would begin at 9 a.m. the next day, exactly when Hayes believed he was cementing his victory. That night, Brody received an unexpected visitor at his hotel room, Amelia. She stood in the hallway, tear-streaked and defiant. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she blurted out. "Trevor helped me sneak out." Brody ushered her inside, his heart hammering. "Amelia, you can't just— Why didn't you fight for us?" she demanded. "You just disappeared when you got back. You didn't even try to see us." "I was told you didn't want to see me," Brody said gently. "And you believe that? After everything?" Her voice broke. "I wrote to you every week. I sent emails when you could get them. I waited for you to come home and then— nothing." Brody knelt before his daughter, seeing for the first time how much she'd grown during his absence. "I'm fighting for you now. I promise you that. Mom's selling our house. We're moving away." "No, you're not," Brody said firmly. "Not unless you want to." Amelia studied his face. "Preston says you can't stop it. He says you signed papers." "Preston doesn't know what's coming." "What does that mean?" Brody chose his words carefully. "It means that sometimes people aren't who they pretend to be. And sometimes the truth has to come out before people get hurt." "Are you going to hurt Preston?" Amelia's eyes widened. "Not physically," Brody assured her. "But yes, I'm going to stop him from taking what's mine, including my family." Amelia nodded slowly. "Good. I hate him. He acts nice when Mom's around, but when she's not, he's different." Brody's blood ran cold. "Different how?" "He talks to us like we're stupid. Tells Trevor he needs to man up and stop missing you. Told me I need to adjust to reality because you never really cared about us anyway." Her voice dropped. "Last week, he grabbed Trevor's arm when Trevor argued with him. Left marks." The cold rage Brody had been carefully controlling crystallized into something lethal. "When did this happen?" "Thursday. Trevor wouldn't let him in his room, and they got into a fight." "Does your mother know?" Amelia shook her head. "Trevor didn't want to tell her. Said it would just make everything worse." Brody took a deep breath, recalibrating his plans. "I need you to go home now. But tomorrow, things are going to change. I promise you that." After safely returning Amelia home with Wyatt's help, Brody made one final call to Leona. "We need to accelerate the timeline," he said, "and add one more component to our strategy." "What's changed?" she asked. "Everything," Brody replied. Hayes crossed a line he can't uncross. The Hayes Development Group offices occupied the 27th floor of Atlanta's premier business tower. All glass, chrome, and calculated intimidation. When Brody arrived for their 9 a.m. meeting, Hayes was waiting with 2 attorneys and a smug smile. "Mr. Harlow," he greeted, extending his hand. "I appreciate your pragmatism in this matter." Brody ignored the outstretched hand. "Where's Melanie?" "She should be here." Hayes's smile tightened. "Melanie trusted me to handle the financial aspects. She'll join us for the final signatures." "That won't work," Brody said calmly. "I need all parties present before we proceed." One of Hayes's attorneys, a nervous-looking younger man, shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Hayes assured us Mrs. Harlow had approved these terms." "Did she approve them in writing?" Brody asked. "I have her power of attorney for business matters," Hayes interjected smoothly. "This isn't a business matter," Brody replied. "It's a divorce settlement affecting my children. Either Melanie attends or we reconvene when she's available." Hayes's jaw tightened momentarily before he forced another smile. "Of course. Let me call her." As Hayes stepped away to make the call, the conference room door opened again. Leona entered, followed by a stern-looking man in a conservative suit. "Mr. Harlow." "Apologies for the delay," Leona said briskly. "Agent Donovan was held up in traffic." "Agent?" Hayes snapped up from his phone. "Franklin Donovan, FBI, Financial Crimes Division." The man introduced himself, placing his credentials on the table. "I'm here as an observer only." At this point, Hayes's attorneys exchanged alarmed glances. "What is this?" Hayes demanded, returning to the table. "Insurance," Brody replied. Is Melanie coming? She'll be here in 20 minutes, Hayes said, his confident demeanor now visibly strained. Perhaps we should delay until perfect timing, Brody interrupted. That gives us just enough time to review some additional documents I've brought. Leona distributed folders to everyone present. These materials document a pattern of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy spanning 7 years in 3 states. Hayes laughed, but it sounded hollow. This is absurd. A transparent attempt at extortion. No extortion, Brody said calmly. Just facts. You've defrauded previous romantic partners through manipulated real estate investments. You're attempting the same with my wife and her trust fund. And most recently, you physically assaulted my 16-year-old son. Hayes's face drained of color. That's a lie. We have photographs of the bruises. Brody cut him off and witness statements. The conference room door opened again as Melanie arrived, looking confused and increasingly alarmed as she absorbed the scene. What's happening? She demanded. Preston, why is there an FBI agent here? Mrs. Harlow, Agent Donovan acknowledged her. Please join us. We were just discussing your investment in the Costa Rica development. My investment? Melanie looked to Hayes. What investment? The $1.2 million transfer you authorized 3 weeks ago, Brody supplied. For the Villa Paraíso development. Melanie froze. That wasn't an investment. That was a property purchase. Our retirement home. There is no retirement home, Brody said gently. The development exists only on paper. The property you think you purchased is an undeveloped parcel of land worth less than $100,000. That's not possible. Preston showed me the plans, the photos, renderings. Stock photos, Leona interjected, sliding additional documents toward Melanie. Here are the actual property records, permits, or lack thereof, and banking transfers showing where your money actually went. Melanie sank into a chair, staring at the evidence. Preston, tell me this isn't true. Hayes's mask of confidence cracked completely. Melanie, this is a misunderstanding. The development is in the early stages. The development doesn't exist, Agent Donovan stated flatly. We've been investigating Mr. Hayes for 18 months. Your husband's evidence has simply accelerated our timeline. Melanie's head snapped up. You knew about this? She asked Brody. I suspected something was wrong when I saw the Costa Rica plans, Brody replied. The investigation confirmed it. So this whole meeting was a trap. Hayes spat. Your husband set us both up. No, Brody corrected. Just you. Melanie is as much a victim of your fraud as your previous partners were. Hayes's attorneys were already gathering their belongings, mumbling about needing to consult with their firm partners. And what about Trevor? Melanie asked, her voice barely audible. What did you mean about assault? Brody slid a photo across the table. Trevor's arm with clear, finger-shaped bruises. Thursday, when Trevor refused to let him into his room. Melanie stared at the photo, then at Hayes, horror dawning on her face. You hurt my son. He was being disrespectful. I barely grabbed him. Hayes protested. The slap echoed in the conference room as Melanie's palm connected with Hayes's face. You lying bastard. You promised me you would never, Mrs. Harlow, Agent Donovan interjected. I suggest we continue this discussion at our office. We'll need formal statements from both you and your son. What followed was a blur of activity. Hayes was escorted out by 2 additional FBI agents who had been waiting outside. Melanie, shell-shocked, agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. When the room finally cleared, only Brody, Leona, and Melanie remained. Why? Melanie asked, looking at Brody. After what I did to you, why would you protect me from him? I didn't do it for you, Brody replied. I did it for Trevor and Amelia. They've been through enough. Melanie nodded slowly, tears welling. What happens now? Now, Brody said, standing. You tell the children the complete truth about everything. Then we'll discuss next steps. As he walked out, Leona following, Melanie called after him. Did you ever love me at all? Or was I just part of some mission plan? Brody paused at the doorway. I loved you enough to let you go when I thought that's what you wanted. And I loved you enough to stop you when I realized you were being manipulated into something dangerous. But not enough to forgive me? Melanie said quietly. No, Brody agreed. Not enough for that. 3 weeks later, the legal landscape had transformed entirely. Preston Hayes faced multiple federal charges for fraud and financial crimes. His assets were frozen. His reputation shattered. The FBI investigation had expanded to include 6 additional victims across 3 states. Melanie had moved out of the family home into a modest apartment. The grand house now sat empty as the legal complexities unraveled. The trust fund had been rescued, most of it, at least, through rapid legal intervention. The Costa Rican property scheme had collapsed entirely. Brody, meanwhile, had purchased a comfortable 4-bedroom house 15 minutes from the children's school. He'd accepted a position as a security consultant for a major corporation, providing the stability his family needed while utilizing his military skills. The custody arrangement had been settled without court intervention. The children would split their time equally between both parents, with holidays alternating. Trevor had already claimed the largest bedroom in Brody's new house as mostly mine, while Amelia was still navigating her complicated feelings about both parents. On a crisp fall Saturday, Brody sat on his back deck, watching Trevor practice lacrosse moves in the yard. Amelia was inside, ostensibly reading, but actually monitoring the conversation through the open window, a fact both Brody and Trevor silently acknowledged. Mom says she's sorry, Trevor said abruptly, pausing with the lacrosse stick. Like 100 times a day. It's getting annoying. She has a lot to be sorry for, Brody replied carefully. Are you ever going to forgive her? Trevor asked. Brody considered the question. Forgiveness isn't simple, Trevor. I can work with her as your mother without forgiving what she did to our marriage. That seems harsh. Maybe, but some things can't be undone. Trevor twirled the stick thoughtfully. She said she got caught up in Preston's lifestyle. The money, the connections. Said she felt important again. And did she feel unimportant with me? Brody asked, genuinely curious. She said, when you were deployed, she felt like she was just waiting all the time. And that scared her. Brody nodded slowly. It wasn't a justification, but it was an explanation he could understand. Fear made people do desperate things. He'd seen it countless times in combat zones. What about Preston? Trevor asked. Do you feel bad about what happened to him? No, Brody said honestly. He hurt you. He tried to steal our family. He deserves what's coming. Mom says he might go to prison for a long time. That's the usual consequence for fraud and assault. Trevor was quiet for a moment. I wanted to tell you about the arm thing, but I thought you wouldn't care anymore. The words hit Brody like physical blows. Trevor, look at me. There is nothing in this world that would make me not care about you or your sister. I will always protect you, always fight for you. Do you understand? Trevor nodded, blinking rapidly. Yeah, I get it now. From inside, Amelia called, Dad, Mom's here. Melanie stood awkwardly in the living room, dressed more simply than Brody had seen her in years. Jeans, a sweater, minimal makeup. The sophisticated corporate attorney image had been replaced by something more authentic, more reminiscent of the woman he'd fallen in love with. I need to speak with your father alone, she told the children. Why don't you get your things for the weekend? When they were alone, Melanie looked around the house, warm, comfortable, already showing signs of becoming a real home. You've done well here. The kids seem comfortable. Brody acknowledged. They're happier than they've been in months, Melanie admitted. Trevor's grades are improving. Amelia is actually talking to me again. She paused. I owe you an apology. A real one, not just the legal maneuvering. You don't owe me anything, Melanie. I do. I let my insecurities and fears drive me into the arms of a predator. I betrayed our vows, lied to our children, and tried to erase you from our lives. Her voice cracked. And despite all that, you saved me. I saved our children, Brody corrected. You were collateral. Melanie flinched, but nodded. Fair enough. But I am grateful and remorseful more than I can express. Brody studied the woman he'd once built his life around. The anger that had fueled him these past weeks had burned down to embers. In its place was something colder, more permanent. Not hatred, but a fundamental severing. I accept your apology, he said finally. For the children's sake, We'll build a workable co-parenting relationship. But that's all it can be. I understand, Melanie whispered. I didn't come here expecting reconciliation. I needed you to know that I recognize what I threw away, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Before Brody could respond, the children returned with their weekend bags. The moment passed. The confession acknowledged, but not absolved. Later that night, after dinner and board games, both children asleep in their new rooms, Brody sat on his deck with a glass of whiskey. His phone buzzed with a text from Wyatt. How'd it go with Melanie? As expected, Brody replied. Apologies, regrets, the usual. And you're still holding the line? Some betrayals can't be undone, Brody wrote back. His phone rang almost immediately. You know, Wyatt said when Brody answered. Forgiveness isn't just for her. It's for you too. I don't need forgiveness, Brody argued. I need clarity, and I have it now. Clarity, huh? Is that why you're sitting alone drinking whiskey at midnight? Brody smiled despite himself. I'm celebrating a victory. The mission is complete. Bullshit, Wyatt said good-naturedly. The mission was punishment. Now that it's done, you don't know what comes next. There was truth in that, Brody realized. The cold, focused purpose that had driven him since receiving Melanie's text had been fulfilled. Preston Hayes was facing justice. The financial schemes had been exposed. The children were safe and beginning to heal. But the emptiness remained. What do you suggest? Brody asked. Move forward, Wyatt replied simply. Not with Melanie. That ship has sailed. But with life. The war's over, brother. Time to come home for real. After hanging up, Brody considered his friend's words. The soldier in him recognized the wisdom. In combat, you completed the mission, honored the fallen, then prepared for the next objective. You didn't linger in the battlefield once it was secured. He looked up at the stars, the same stars he'd gazed at from desert encampments and mountain outposts. For the first time since returning, he felt the weight of his armor beginning to lift. Not forgiveness, not yet. Perhaps not ever. But the possibility of something else, something new. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. The terms were fair, negotiated without animosity. The custody arrangement had proven successful, with both children thriving under the stability of their new normal. Preston Hayes had accepted a plea deal, facing 8 years in federal prison with restitution requirements that would keep him financially constrained for decades. Brody's security consulting firm had expanded, his military expertise proving valuable in corporate settings. He'd added 2 more former Rangers to his team, creating a brotherhood of support that reminded him of what he'd valued most during his service. On a warm spring afternoon, Brody stood watching Trevor play in the state lacrosse championship. Beside him, Amelia cheered enthusiastically for her brother. On Amelia's other side, Melanie maintained a respectful distance from Brody, close. Enough to present a united front for their son, but far enough to acknowledge boundaries. He's really good, remarked a voice beside Brody. He turned to find an athletic woman with curly brown hair observing the game with professional interest. He works hard at it, Brody replied. Scholarship potential for sure, she commented. I'm Vanessa, by the way. College recruiter for Northwestern. Brody Harlow. That's my son, number 17. Great stick skills. Their conversation continued easily through the first half, Vanessa's knowledge of the game impressive. When halftime arrived, Amelia tugged Brody's arm. Dad, I'm getting hot chocolate. Want some water for me? Brody replied, handing her a few dollars. Miss Harlow? Vanessa asked, gesturing to Melanie. Can I get you anything? Melanie looked startled at being addressed. Oh no, thank you. And it's Stanford now. I've gone back to my maiden name. Mom, come help me carry everything. Amelia suggested, a transparent attempt to give her father space with the attractive recruiter. As they walked away, Vanessa smiled. Smart kid. Not subtle, but smart. Brody chuckled. They both think I need to get back out there, as Trevor puts it. And do you need to get back out there? The question was direct, her interest clear. 6 months ago, Brody wouldn't have recognized the opportunity, much less considered taking it. Now, he found himself actually contemplating the possibility. I might, he admitted. Eventually. Vanessa nodded, respecting the measured response. Well, when eventually arrives, maybe we could get coffee. Talk about your son's lacrosse future, among other things. She handed him a business card, their fingers brushing briefly. I'm in town until Sunday. The game resumed before Brody could respond, but something had shifted. A door cracking open to possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider. After Trevor's team won in a nail-biting finish, the celebration spilled into an early dinner at the teenagers' favorite restaurant. Melanie begged off, citing work commitments, leaving Brody alone with the children. Who is that woman you were talking to? Trevor asked between bites of burger. A college recruiter, Brody replied. From Northwestern. She was very impressed with your play. Dad, Trevor rolled his eyes. She gave you her number. I saw. For recruitment purposes, Brody maintained, though his slight smile betrayed him. You should call her, Amelia declared. She was pretty, and she knew about lacrosse, so she's smart too. I'll consider it, Brody conceded. Later that night, after dropping the kids at Melanie's apartment, Brody returned to his empty house. He placed Vanessa's card on his desk, not yet ready to act, but no longer automatically rejecting the possibility. His phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. Trevor can't stop talking about the Northwestern recruiter. Says, she might be the one for you. Just a friendly heads up that our son is planning your wedding despite himself. Brody laughed. Thanks for the warning, he texted back. I'll manage expectations. You deserve happiness, Brody, came Melanie's unexpected reply. I mean that sincerely. He stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Finally, he simply wrote, same to the kids. Thank you for today. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement that they had moved beyond the battlefield into whatever came next, separate paths, but linked eternally through the children they both loved. The following morning, Brody woke early for his weekend run. As he laced his shoes, he glanced at Vanessa's business card still sitting on his desk. After a moment's consideration, he picked it up and tucked it into his wallet. The war was over. He had protected what mattered most. He had remained true to his principles, never yielding, never forgiving those who had betrayed him, but also not allowing bitterness to consume him. As he stepped outside into the dawn light, Brody reflected on the text message that had started everything. Don't bother coming. The locks are changed. The kids don't want you. It's over. His reply had been simple. As you wish. Not surrender. Not acquiescence. But the calm declaration of a man who understood that sometimes the most powerful response was to accept the challenge and respond on your own terms. The battle had been fought, decisively won. And now, for the first time in years, Brick Harlow was truly home.